Hi, in today's episode, I am sharing the hugely inspiring conversation that I had with my amazing friend and colleague, Ifalase McGowan, about trauma, shame, and healing, the thing that so many of us carry but don't always talk about. Ifalase is an advanced EFT practitioner who shares her own journey and powerful insights on how we can free ourselves of the weight of shame and anxiety. This is just part one of a two-part series. In part two, you'll get to experience EFT in action with a live session led by Ifalase, designed to help you release shame. So stay tuned and let's begin this journey of healing and self-compassion together. Welcome to The Secrets in the Powder Room, where we share stories and open up conversations about all the secrets women are forced to keep out of fear and shame. I'm Louise Bryant, professional certified coach, intuitive eating counsellor, and trauma-informed domestic abuse specialist and survivor. We're here to support you on your healing journey and help you feel like you're not alone. This is not to be a replacement of your own professional, medical, or legal advice. This podcast contains adult language and content. Listener discretion is advised. So just to introduce Ifalase McGowan, Ifalase helps people break free from the debilitating PTSD symptoms that keep them stuck in anxiety, hypervigilance, and emotional pain. As an advanced EFT practitioner and certified coach, she combines evidence-based approaches from psychology, neuroscience, and NLP with gentle movement and mindfulness practices. Through her transformative in-person retreats and personalised coaching, clients learn practical tools to find lasting relief from both the mental and physical impacts of trauma. Hello, Ifalase. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Louise.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. I've been asking you for a while to come on the podcast and we are finally here. So this is a very, very, very exciting topic. Would you like to start maybe by telling us a little bit about your journey and what led you to become an EFT practitioner and a coach?
Great question. Okay, so my journey actually began with Big Brother. So it was I don't know what year it was, to be honest, but it was a while ago. It was definitely one of the first seasons. And I finished the very last episode and I was standing up at the end of my bed, just like, what am I gonna do now? Like what I can't watch anybody, I can't observe anybody. And that led me to choose psychology as my degree. And so I was studying the mind and how people interact. And specifically, what I found fascinating was human development and how we develop impacts our brains. And that's when I first started off with neuroscience. And then slowly in my career, as you do, you start off in one place and then you start to figure out in your 20s, like, oh, okay, don't like this. Or, actually, I quite like this. But everything I did was always around people. I was very natural at getting to know people really well, and I really enjoyed it. And so eventually I came across a lady who said to me that it was a mother-in-law, does this weird tapping thing on your face. And literally that alone was enough for me to just go, yeah, that's weird. I need to know more about it. So I looked it up and then I came across someone else who'd studied it. And then that was it. I just went all in. I was like, I want to know what the weird tapping on your face thing is.
Interesting. And what about becoming a coach?
I remember one of the reasons why I wanted to become a coach was that I felt quite helpless when someone would come to me and say what was happening, what was troubling them. And I always had this inkling that I could learn this. I wanted to be that person that someone could come to for support. And then during the pandemic, I started to notice while I was doing one-to-one leadership coaching that so many people's well-being just started to plummet. And again, I would just meet with them, I'd talk to them, but I started to notice patterns. I think when you've worked with psychology, when you work with people for so long, one of the things that my mind loves to do is to make sense of what I'm seeing. And so I started to notice that there was a correlation between people who were suffering from trauma in the past and their physical health in the present, their mannerisms, even their habits. And I don't want to say bad habits, but I kind of want to talk about it as something that comes up in the present day that is getting in their way of being happy.
So destructive habits, maybe.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Like, would that be things like alcohol use or?
Absolutely. So absolutely alcohol use. I think one of the things that we don't realize is that if we just peel back a little bit more, it's alcohol, it's drug use, it's even prescription drugs, but it's even sugar. Like in our day to day, like how many times do you reach for something to eat because you're trying to make yourself feel better? That's what a smoker's doing. That's what someone who's taking drugs is doing. Like we're all doing the same thing. We're trying to quell something that's coming up for us. And I think there's so many things that we don't get taught when we're younger, which would have been really useful. Like, okay, here's this emotion. Should we work on how to deal with it? Whereas we're always kind of told, don't cry, be a big girl, or, just like, let's get on with it. Let's keep going. Just keep working hard and you'll get there. And so many things are brushed over in our normal day to day, let alone when something traumatic happens. Like, how do you get support for that?
Absolutely. Especially when you've got parents, sorry to just step in, but especially when you've got parents who aren't able to, they've not had their own needs met. So how on earth can they support their children
Yeah.
when they haven't been able to, deal with their own emotions, and they're doing that and they're drinking to suppress all them feelings that they're getting and all that trauma that happened when they were younger that they weren't allowed to talk about, or
That no one did talk about.
no one talks about it. Like what happens in the family stays in the families, or, let's pretend that didn't happen. And then that way it didn't happen and it will go away. And, sometimes we blame our parents and we go, well, why wasn't you better? But actually they're just doing what they've learned. And
yeah. And so much is about perspective, right? Because I genuinely remember growing up believing my parents were the only ones that argued and that everyone else's houses were just these perfect, happy places. If you even if we wound back to when Big Brother was on, one of the things that fascinated me about it was because there were psychologists explaining what was happening. And I think that was really one of the first times I'd ever seen any TV show explain human behavior. Forgive me, I was probably only watching Channel 4. But I hadn't seen it. And I was fascinated by anything that came out that had a psychologist point of view on how people were behaving. I remember the Millennium Children show that they used to have on. And it was fascinating. But if you went back like 20, 30 years, the amount of information about trauma, about how people react to it, just wasn't there. And even today, with all the information, I think one of the things, the biggest thing that gets me is that so many people in the industry of psychology and that so many of us know practically what's going on, but don't know how to actually fix it. We don't know how to actually do anything about it. So I was starting my career in this world of organizational psychology, and they would understand so much about human behavior, but actually trying to change it was relatively much further behind. So I was on an absolute mission to be like, no, I'm going to I guess I was trying to say I'm going to fix this, which is not the right mindset that you need to go into when you're trying to work on your own well-being. You're not trying to fix anything. You're not broken. However, I did want to take my mindset and my life and make it a happier one. And that's been like a 20-year journey of finding all of these different healing modalities and trying out different types of therapy. And then I found EFT, and I really do feel like the premise of it, the structure of it, the idea that there is something like there's an echo of the past that kind of stays with you from that time when you were traumatized for whatever reason. And this can be big trauma, it can be a little trauma. In that moment, if something happened to you and you feel those, I don't want to say negative because they're not negative emotions, but if we feel our feelings and then we don't understand what's going on and they're quite overwhelming, that's when trauma happens. Or in my view, within EFT, that's when trauma does or can occur. So therefore, our mind says, okay, this has happened to me. I'm now not safe. So I'm going to use this strategy to help me out. And then that strategy as an 8-year-old is probably something like, I'm not going to speak up anymore, or I'm going to eat this sweet because it makes me feel better. We'll have survival strategies that will come to us. Unfortunately, they stick with us. Those moments that are really intense, that's when our memories just love to like hold on to information. And so we just take that on. And so it's just not something that we need to blame ourselves for, but that awareness of it, that awareness of being able to manage your emotions and understand how you're feeling and be able to act on it, has that learning for me has completely changed my life. And being able to share that with my clients, I absolutely adore that, because it's like you've got this secret key to life and you're like, oh my God, look, I feel like I found it. And I'm like, I need to tell everyone. So, yeah.
And do you believe, just sort of like going back to something you said before, like you wanted to change people, you wanted to fix everything. Do you think there's people who might say, oh, EFT doesn't work, but do you think it's kind of more of a mindset from the person? You kind of go into this, and if they're kind of stuck in that kind of story, if you like, of I'm so broken, nothing's going to fix me. I'm just curious around that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I can answer it like 50 different ways, but let's try and keep it down. The one area I would say is that with anything that you feel heals you, and it doesn't necessarily need to be traditional healing like therapy. I've recently joined a musical dance theatre class, and like I genuinely think it's the best thing in the world. And that's so healing for my inner child. Like that's healing for me. And so healing comes in all different forms. But trust in the person who you're working with, I think, is the most paramount feeling that you can feel. So I would say that would trump anything else. And the belief that you feel that you're working with the right person, that you're safe, that you can be vulnerable, that you can share all you need to share, like that is huge. Because if I go and see my coach therapist person and I can't actually say what's going on for me, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. I need to be able to feel safe to share what I need to share.
Yeah. And that's the key, isn't it? It's that safety.
I would say that is a belief. So I can say I'm an EFT practitioner and do some tapping. It's very common to have tapping added on to like a yoga class. However, if you're not trained in EFT, and when you belong to a certification body, that means that you have to get mentoring every year for a certain amount of hours. You have to do continual development. It's not something that you just learn off the cuff. So as much as EFT is great, you don't need like that much guidance to get you going or to get you started. I can understand when people say to me, oh, EFT doesn't work, if they're coming from a place of, oh, I've tried it with this person and it didn't work for me. The other layer that I would just add in is just that there are parts of us that form beliefs about things. And so if you have this really strong belief that something won't work, that's the thing that you need to focus on first. So with my clients or within a group, I'll often start with, even though we're tapping on our faces and it feels really ridiculous, I'm willing to just accept that this might do something for me. And if it doesn't, that's okay. So you're starting off with that belief. Like if you believe I'm broken, I can't be fixed, we have to work on the fact that you believe that first before we can get into the other part. Because a part of us will form this protective shield. So if our trauma has been really intense, it's easier for us to say, no, I don't want to deal with it, which is totally fine. Like maybe it's not the right time. So many answers to that question.
Yeah, no, and I hear these things a lot, the certain therapies don't work, but I just wonder how, is it the right therapist? Is it the right amount you've put into it? Is it, because like you say, you can do EFT on TikTok, so oh no, I've done a few taps and that didn't work. I've done it twice. I just felt silly and I never done it again.
Yeah.
So, or actually working with a therapist for a period of time. Yeah. And it's interesting. Sorry, I know it's like a jumping thing, but it is also with the coaching, it's, we are obviously, you and I are coaches the same. We have our certifications, we have to do mentoring, we have to do training, but there's lots of people out there who just call themselves a coach, which is fine. And they've done a small course and they help people by doing a coach approach, but it is finding that person. You can say, well, coaching doesn't work, or it's about finding that right therapist that's actually, and doing your research, I suppose, as well, and into that therapist, talking to them, see if you have that connection, seeing if you trust them, seeing what credentials they've got, what experience they've got, what reviews they've got. I think that's really important as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And it reminds me of that Someone told me once, never take advice. This is probably not the best advice, but never take advice from someone who's not where you want to be. I find it a little bit easier to take. I wouldn't take all of it. Of course, any feedback's good feedback. You can always learn, blah, blah. However, I would also say, have they done their work? Because I think one of the most paramount things is that if I haven't been to where I've been to and done all of my healing, my clients can only get to as far as I've got.
Mm,
And so it was fascinating along my journey of being a coach, of being an EFT practitioner, of doing all of these different modalities. I found that my clients could only ever get as far as I could. And then on the off cuff, some of them would like just like zoom off. I'd be like, wow, that was amazing. However, in general, we tend to resonate with the person that we're working with. So I think it is really important for the person that is supporting you that they're getting support, that they have had support themselves. That's just a personal view.
yeah.
They don't have to give you advice, but I think it makes a difference if I've done my work because I can hold more space.
Absolutely. And I think there's a thing that I sort of saw when I'm doing some business kind of work was your ideal client is you 5 years ago. So it's kind of knowing that you've done your journey and you're still, we're all growing, aren't we? We're all still, there's always the work. There's always something else that's going to come up and go, remember me?
Wait, I mean, yeah.
Well, you forgot about me, didn't you? You thought you put me in a box. And here I am. Time to come back now. But also, I think, you know, for me, trauma came up for me when I was safe. I'd moved into a new house, you know, good marriage, supportive husband, work was steady, you know, everything was good in my life. And then a trauma just went, hello, we're safe now. Let's do this. And you know, my therapist gave me that option. We can keep that in the wardrobe. We can keep it locked up in the cupboard. It will stay there, or we can let it out and face it. And I'm like, yeah, let's let it out, face it. And it ran away for now. Who knows, it'll never come back. But yeah, I think trauma is a very complex thing, isn't it? So,
Absolutely.
so let's go back to the question
Yes.
about shame.
Yeah.
So it's such a powerful emotion, especially for women. And how does trauma influence feelings of shame, and why is it so important to address it, do you think?
I'll do it in the context of myself because it's difficult to give an answer that's generic and for everyone else. So hopefully people will be able to take from my own story. So for me, just a couple of weeks ago, I released a trauma that I did remember had happened to me when I was about 8 years old. I did remember, and I could, if someone really asked me and spent a long time with me, they could have probably got to it. However, I do feel that I've spoken to a lot of therapists, like I've spoken to loads of people, and it just didn't come up. And I think there's something so true in what you're saying. You need to feel safe enough for it to even come up. And I was with someone who was supporting me that felt wholly and completely safe. And so it came up. And the way that I'd recalled it, I took the guilt with me. So I'd forgotten what had actually happened to me, and I took the guilt of what I was doing, my behaviors as a result. And really, I've spent years taking the guilt of how I was reacting. So, like you said, when you go into that safe place, when you move in with your partner, you've got your flat, this is for me, that's when everything came up. Because up until then, I was probably always focusing on something, just keeping busy enough not to actually address it. And same like you, as soon as you calm down, it can be that moment where that panic starts to rise. And so, well, for me, it shows up as panic. And had I not been in that safe, vulnerable space, I don't think it would have come up, first of all. And I took that guilt, but that guilt was in a form of shame.
What do you think the difference is, guilt and shame? So it's just something that came up when I was listening to Brené Brown, and she said that guilt is a feeling of, I am sorry, I did something and I'm sorry for that. Whereas shame is more of, I did something and I'm bad for that. Does that make sense? It's like it's more of an internal thing of, I'm the bad person, as opposed to, I'm sorry I did that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I would say that I was filled with, actually, I was probably filled with shame versus guilt, if those are the terminologies. I was labeling it as guilt. but I think guilt that lasts a long time and that you're attributing to your own identity becomes shame. So yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I would agree.
Thanks, Brené. We love a bit of Brené Brown.
Definitely. Okay, so when you came to me and said you wanted to work on your shame, I was like, oh God, this is really relevant now, because I'd taken all of those behaviors, like all of those times where I wasn't able to step up and do something, or as I would expect the perfect version of myself to do, or I wouldn't act like the girlfriend I wanted to be, or I wouldn't act like the family member I wanted to be. I guilted myself and I shamed myself, which at the time, I was doing things and I wasn't proud of them. So it makes sense that I would have felt guilty or shameful. However, I think what's difficult is that sometimes the trauma hides itself, and then you've got all these behaviors and you've not remembered actually this happened. And so it's kind of hiding under the surface. And then it's like pushing up every so often. And then it's pushing up in a way that you can't control. So I think it's those elements of feeling like, oh, I did this, but that's not who I am. Like one of my friends said to me once, it's your so the first thing that you do, okay, so I said to her, there was someone who was on the street and they didn't have a home. And I said, I walked past, and then afterwards I felt really guilty that I just walked past. And she said to me, it's your initial reaction that's your trained response. And then it's the afterwards, the time when you actually stop and allow yourself to be or think properly, that you kick in. So I guess what I'm saying is that when we're in under a lot of stress, so let's say that stress from the past goes underneath the surface, and that's counting towards the daily stress, then we're under more stress in our day to day. It's like a jack in the box. It could just come out, and then we're like, oh God, who was that? I'm not Jack. Why are my arms flailing? Like, why am I struggling?
Or could we label it as that was Jack?
I like
That's
that.
not me. That was Jack. Get back in your box, Jack.
Absolutely.
Or get out, get out.
I
Do
love
the
that.
work and
Yeah.
leave.
Jack in the box came out. And then you're thinking, what have I done? You get back in and you're like, oh, what have I done? And it's really not about blaming the past. Like, it's really not about that, but it's just accepting that this is what human beings do. We remember things that have high intensity and we keep them because it keeps us alive. And so we create this story around it. And I think when you said earlier, people can get stuck in their story, that's so true. There is so much that we can do that hurts ourselves when we keep going over the story. Our brain doesn't know the difference if something's happening or if it's not happening. So if you keep telling that story, you are absolutely re-traumatizing yourself. And if you're constantly feeling that guilt, feeling that shame, you're just like filling that bucket up. You're just making Jack bigger and bigger and bigger every time. So
re-traumatizing yourself.
Yeah, it just brings me to that self-compassion and how important that is for people to be able to even take that first step towards healing. The self-compassion, self-awareness of like, this has happened to me, and to acknowledge it. Just to acknowledge it, I think, is really important. But just being really careful about that story of this is who I am because this happened to me. That's the bit that I just would love to give to people and to encourage people to not feel like the past equals the future. Because quite often I think that all those maladaptive behaviors, as one of my clients calls it, and all those jack in the boxes, I think they're pillars of strength that are coming out, and they're just coming out in weird ways. So if you can work on healing those things about you, that energy gets to channel into good things and all the things that you want in your life.
Fantastic. And I kind of see my stories. Like I just want to own my stories. There is obviously some shame around that, and I know you're going to help me with some of that today. Yeah, but that's it, isn't it? Just kind of dealing with all these smaller things, and then that lizard brain that comes out, that primal brain, that stuff that's always getting us to survive. Something bad happened to us in the past, so this is our primal brain keeping us safe because it thinks it's happening again, isn't it? I suppose that's what our brains are designed to do, and that's why we're trying to be in the moment and be present, because we learn things from the past and then we project them onto the future. And sometimes, it's that whole kind of worrying about this could happen to me, this could happen. And our primal brains go, let's stay safe and not do the work. And if we actually open this jack in the box and let this jack out, that's going to be really dangerous for me, isn't it? But being safe to do that. So, what do you think some of the biggest barriers are that women face in their healing journey?
For me, I think if we look at society and what is deemed as normal, there is no normal. However, if the world shows you that the man is the superhero, the man is the superstar, and you grow up watching that, I think it would be unethical to not acknowledge the fact that you've seen a portrayal of a, in brackets, normal person, and that your brain can't be affected by that, to say, oh, I'm not that, I'm something else. And so many of us are something else. So many of us don't look like the Brad Pitts or the Leonardo DiCaprios in the world. Like, so many of us aren't that. And yet, I think just being women alone, and for all the different diversities that do exist as well, I think that that means we're growing up with one version of, in brackets again, normal, and then we're feeling like an other or not fully accepted for who we are. So I think that in itself starts off as a, okay, I'm not the main character, because that's not how movies show women. They're not the main character. They're very rarely the main character. And in the world, like now, hopefully that's starting to change, but that wasn't the case when we were all growing up. So if we're always seeing ourselves as that secondary character, I just don't see how that can not impact ourselves in our own minds, unless you haven't watched a lot of TV, which I think is fun.
Yeah, it's even like, I was thinking something the other day. It's like the Smurfs. I don't even remember the Smurfs. And then there was all the Smurfs, and there was like Genius Smurf and Papa Smurf and Angry Smurf. And then there was Smurfette. She didn't have a superpower. She didn't have a super thing. She was just, I mean, we're making an assumption that she was a girl.
Yeah, I love the analogies there. And I think what I noticed with my partner, I think you just pick up weird, like, ways of behaving that you wouldn't do. Like, I ask him for permission to join courses. I'm like, why am I doing that? I don't need permission. My money. Okay, maybe there's a lot of time involved, but I do these weird things. And I'm like, why am I doing that? Like, and I'm literally like, I'm not that kind of person. I'm obviously very independent. Like, I'm fully capable, fully, well, and great. If you're not, that's fine too. But yeah, it's funny. You just get these behaviors. And I do think that that can mean that you're not presenting in that way of, I'm important too, or I'm important, full stop, period. So I think that can mean that you're busy doing other things, that you're taking on, we're taking on more roles in the household. Like, there's just so many things that if you're, as a result of being a woman, it just puts you in that category of a lot. However, we do also have the benefit of being women, of course. So we're more likely to be talking to our friends about things that are actually happening to us, which is amazing. We know that men suffer with their mental health far more than women do as well. However, things like burnout, stress, like taking a lot on, women are more likely to suffer from that on that side. So I think the things that I've seen, the commonalities between the women that I've seen have been just this view of, I'm not good enough, and therefore I need to work really hard. I need to go the extra mile. And I think I took that as well. I would always think that there's something wrong with me. I can't just fix the problem I've got. I need to fix myself. And eventually that ended up me being in a very good place. However, the rhetoric that I'm broken is not helpful in the slightest, because that doesn't help anybody.
No, it doesn't. And what advice might you give someone who's listening today who's maybe stuck in their trauma?
First thing that comes to me is self-compassion. And it's proven, the more self-compassion you have, the less likely you are to suffer from depression and anxiety. So depression being feeling regrets from the past, and anxiety being stress in the future. So if I'm solely focused, or if I have a lens of focus on, I need to look after myself, I'm more likely to put boundaries up. I'm more likely to say, make time to put things in my diary that I want to do. Or I'm more likely to, make sure I get to the gym in the morning, or, there's all these different habits that get created all from prioritizing yourself. And I think we have such a horrible word, selfish, for prioritizing yourself. why is there no word for me? And I think obviously it makes sense. We're human beings, we're born in communities, like we thrive in community, we have our families, we have a lot of support. Like it makes sense that we wouldn't have thought of this idea of looking after yourself all by yourself. But I think we are in a world that's sped up so fast. It's so much more digital, so much more online. There's so many things that are happening in our day to day that is causing more stress and probably making things more likely to be triggered. So yeah, self-care, self-compassion, I would say, is the third thing. And work out what that means for you. Like work out, make a list, like write down, if I was being self-compassionate, what are the things that I would be doing? And I would start there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it. It's putting, your oxygen mask on first. You can't look after the army of people. You can't look after your children. You can't show up and be the best person at work. You can't be the best wife, best girlfriend, best friend if you're not okay. And I always say, everything that I do, whether it be career coaching, domestic abuse, intuitive eating, everything is self-care, self-compassion. It starts there. So
yeah,
shall we do some tapping on shame and do this now? Or was there anything else you wanted to cover before we moved on to that?
No, let's do it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Secrets in the Powder Room podcast with me and Ifalase. I hope this conversation has given you some powerful insights into healing from trauma and releasing shame, but we're not stopping here. In part 2, Ifalase will guide me and you through a live EFT session where you can follow along and experience the power of tapping for yourself. Plus, I'll be sharing some reflective journaling questions to help you go even deeper into your healing journey. So be sure to tune into part 2. You won't want to miss it. And if today's episode resonates with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Send me a message, share it with a friend who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't ever miss an episode. See you in part 2.